Okay. I'm so excited to be speaking to Diana Zarowin today. Diana is a first-year medical student at Albert Einstein College of Medicine in New York City. Interestingly, Diana and I met on Instagram over a year ago when I first started my professional account. She was one of my first friends in that space, and I've watched her flourish over this year. She finished a very difficult post-bac program at University of Pennsylvania last year, and we bonded over that since I had also been a post-bac student. We spoke often when Diana was applying to med school, and I'm so proud of where she wound up enrolling, but not surprised at all because she's super smart and well-rounded. Diana was a founder of an amazing group at Penn called Penn Future Women in Health and worked for the dermatology department at UPenn, just to give you some inspiration for great activities that pre-meds can do. There is so much I'm sure I could talk to Diana about that you'll find helpful, but today we're going to focus on her experience with this pandemic as a new medical student. So hi, Diana. I'm so glad we found
Hi.
time to talk. How are you doing?
Likewise. I'm good, thank God. Thrilled to be here chatting with you.
So you are in your first year now at Albert Einstein, and you were living on campus, correct?
Yeah, yes.
And has everybody left?
I would say a good percentage of our class and the population of students at Einstein in general did go home, although we were allowed to stay on campus and they had really good safety measures in place if you did want to stay. But most people decided to go be with their family.
Okay, so people are sort of spread out maybe over the all over the country now.
Yeah, I know a couple people who went back home to like California or Florida and took a plane to get there. Yeah.
So to go back a little bit, this was, obviously your first year of medical school and everything started normally. Can you tell us just a little bit, just because people want to hear about medical school, how things were going as a new medical student? Did you feel like until COVID hit that you were adjusting well? Was it a huge shock what medical school was like compared to post-bac? What was kind of the overall place you were at before all of this happened?
Yeah, so it happens to be that about a day before all of the COVID restrictions started to happen, we finished our anatomy course. And at Einstein, we have a gross anatomy dissection lab and in class lecture. And I feel like we're very fortunate that anatomy happened to have finished right when we had to begin the social distancing. We're now at the last part of our first year career, so we actually just switched over to systems based. But prior to that, we were doing anatomy, our intro to clinical medicine course, which has an on-site in the hospital component, where we actually get to be interviewing patients and interacting with our preceptors, who are physicians. And then we also finish our biochemistry sequence as well as our histology intro. So right now, what we have left for the year is renal and disease mechanisms and bioethics and a biostats course.
So luckily you were sort of finished with one unit. There's not like something big you need to make up. It sort of was a decent time.
Exactly, especially being out of the anatomy lab and having taken that practical final exam.
So when news of COVID started to hit and we started to hear about this, what was it like? Do you think that there was a quick response? Where there were a lot of people that didn't really think it was going to be a big deal? Like, how did the students feel about it?
Yeah, I think it was very mixed, at least for our class. Some people reacted, strongly and decided to go home immediately. Others wanted to wait it out and take it day by day. I think that the administrative response was pretty conservative, and they did update us day by day. So if you did decide to stay on campus and take it day by day, you were being continually updated and kind of abreast of what was going on and able to see what the administration was dealing with as well.
So you don't feel like it was sort of like people were freaking out, or, like, do you feel like the students themselves were very nervous or worried about what this was going to mean for school? Like, do you feel like people were pretty calm because you guys were well informed?
Yeah, I feel like we were pretty calm because we were getting that constant flow of information and we knew that our education wouldn't be stopped at all. We didn't exactly know what the virtual curriculum changes were going to be, but we knew that as first years at least, we were going to continue with the rest of the year and finish up all of our, mandated first year coursework.
So they made it clear that this wasn't going to mean that it was going to impact like your graduation or your timing or summer or any of that.
Exactly. And I think that they made it clear very early on that they were taking literally every measure possible to ensure that we were getting the same lectures we would normally have been getting in the classroom, whether that's the large lecture hall or small group. They were making every effort to get that to us exactly, or as close to exactly as it would have been given normal circumstances.
Got it. And do you think that the professors have all been like technologically savvy? Because I see sometimes with my own kids, teachers, like the older ones and people that are not, have never used Zoom in their life, like it's very hard for them to adapt. So I don't know how it works with maybe, I imagine my anatomy professor in med school was like 75 years old. For some people, it's not so simple. So how has it been? Do you think it's been pretty seamless?
Yeah, so I think that they have really worked super hard with all different age groups of professors to ensure that we are getting the classes via Zoom or via our media site recorded lectures. And I know that IT is always super receptive to any of our comments or suggestions on how to make it even better. In fact, we weren't utilizing Zoom really in the beginning. We were mostly utilizing MediaSite, and it turned out that students had requested to change over to Zoom,
Mm,
the better streaming capacity, and we did that, and now everything is pretty seamless.
that's good. So did your school quickly fill in like their virtual curriculum? Like, was there any lag where like you weren't really sure what you were supposed to be doing, or were they here like, here's what we're going to do, here's the website, and they set it up quickly?
Yeah, it was pretty much the latter. We were getting daily emails letting us know what the next day's schedule was going to be like pretty much right from the start. Now we get weekly emails informing us of the exact schedules and where all the materials are going to be posted for the Zoom lectures. So I don't really feel like we skipped a beat at all.
What about exams? How does that work since you're home?
Yeah, so our exam schedule is exactly the same as it was intended to be. All our exams are, recorded in the same amount of time, and they're all closed book, and the honor system is at play.
So it's the honor system, right? There's no way to ensure that it's closed book, but
I'm trusting that my classmates are very honest and that we're all following the honor code, and I think the professors are knowing and expecting that of us as well.
okay, so nothing has changed in terms of grading or timing or anything like that. Right.
No, it's all the exact same, and the exams are at the exact same, time and schedule. They do make adjustments time-wise for those that did happen to go home to the West Coast, if they have a different, time zone that they need to take
Right,
the
right.
exam later in the day. They were very good about adjusting it.
So besides just talking about the school, since it sounds like, they really have everything set up and nothing really changed that much besides just not physically going to class, what has been the biggest way that your day-to-day life has changed?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I was a class goer. I love going to class. I find that it's a really good part of my routine and being in person and interacting with the professor and my classmates. So the switch to virtual learning was definitely something different. I kind of took it from a gratitude perspective. I know that you're also very into the gratitude
Sure,
mindset
sure.
of at least my education is continuing exactly as it should have been. So I think that adjustment was something that I definitely had to get used to. Um, Also, the not being able to go to the gym, working out is a big part of my daily routine, and I had to adjust to working out at home, which thankfully there are so many amazing resources now for free
Right,
workouts
right.
at home or discounted. Companies are really working with the customers, but that was another big adjustment, I would say. Um, and just of course the freedom of not being able to go outside either without proper protection or just with the fear of not wanting to be potentially around anybody that has the virus.
Right. And do you feel like family members or anybody, now that you are a medical student, people, I feel like when I was in medical school, almost assume that you're like a doctor already sometimes. Some people think that you don't know anything yet, and some people do. But do you think that there's people that have like friends that are not in med school or family members that have like reached out to you to find out, which article is true or like what should I be doing? Do people kind of look at you any differently than maybe they would have a year ago?
So, luckily, they go to my mom for that. She is a physician, so
Okay,
she is a
girl.
much greater authority than I am on anything related to anything in medicine thus far. But I definitely have friends who are hoping or they're open to discussing ideas and they're curious about my perspective on it, especially as a first year student. But I'm definitely not considered any sort of authority yet on medicine.
Okay, that's fair. That's a fair answer. So overall, you already said about your day-to-day life and, you know, when you're talking to your fellow the students in your class, I know you're not like, living with them anymore, you're not seeing them every day, but A, has everyone sort of stayed in touch? And B, do you think that like the morale has stayed high? Do you think that a lot of people are worried about, this year your curriculum's the same, but what about next year? What if you can't go into the hospitals? What if you can't get the right residency? Like, or if you know anybody that's older than you, like what are sort of the fears or stresses among medical students right now?
Yeah, that's also a really good question. In terms of keeping in touch, I can't imagine something like this happening in a time that wasn't so technologically accessible.
Right.
Um, take class and everything out of the equation, but just keeping in touch with people, socially distancing for so long, it would be extremely challenging, more so than it already is without, FaceTime and all the
Hmm.
different forms of social media. In terms of the morale, I think my grade does share that sense of gratitude that it really couldn't have happened at a quote unquote better time for us as first year students. Our curriculum right now really wasn't changed at all due to COVID. I think we're also fortunate in a way that the administration is really playing with the second years or rising third years now and how their curriculum had to shift.
Right.
So they're already experimenting and learning through the second years, and hopefully they're going to know a lot more should there be a second wave or should our curriculum have to change at all. I think one of the big questions right now for first years around the country is probably if step is going to be pass fail and when step is going to be taken given COVID. I know even some of the second years are concerned about the prometric sites being open, if they're going to be able to take their step exams. So I
Right.
think that's something that people are wondering about. But luckily, I think the administration is going to have a lot of practice with the second years figuring that out for them. That by the time it gets to us, hopefully it will all be kind of pretty crisp and ready to go.
Right. It seems like it might actually be the best to be a first year right now because you really are just taking your exams. Like you're not studying for a huge step exam. You're not supposed to be in the hospital. The medical school I'm working with, this the students that were in the middle of their rotations, it's all on hold right now, but we don't necessarily want them to graduate late. So we're trying to like, okay, now your rotations are shorter and now half of it's virtual, but that really is not like a great plan. You're supposed to be working with actual patients. So
Right.
the older grades, if you want to call it, or the older years, it's much harder. So for you guys, all things aside, as bad as this is, it probably is the best to be a first year right now. And so they can learn from these other classes.
Yeah, and exactly around the time that anatomy ended, our other one of our other courses, Intro to Clinical Medicine, where we are actually on site in the hospital working with physicians, that also had just ended. So we weren't, none of the clinical time that we're given as first years was taken away from us, even so, considering that COVID arrived at
Right.
that time.
Right. That's good. And were there people, since you were sort of doing some clinical work, were there people in your class that got sick? Have there been people that have been like really directly affected, from the contact that you've kept that you've heard about?
Fortunately, not in my grade that I've heard of. But I know the administration did keep us all informed that they thought that one third year may have been exposed from their rotation. But no, thankfully, no one that I know of has contracted COVID.
Oh, that's good. So that's good.
Yeah.
So going to, not some non-academic things, it seems that there are a lot of medical students that are trying to help out, right? You've already pledged that you want to be a doctor, but you can't really do much right now. And so I've been reading about a lot of medical students that have done different, volunteer projects and charity projects. So what have you or your classmates done to try to help out recently?
Yeah, so I definitely echo, your intro there that it's really hard being a first year medical student and knowing a lot of what's going on site, on the front lines in the clinic, but not being able to actually go in and help out. In fact, the administration was pretty strict with first years, as in they let us know that we weren't allowed to kind of be interacting with any physicians once all of the COVID information started to become more widespread. So I think a way that a lot of us, who were feeling helpless at home, but also really energized and wanted to do something, were figuring out ways to volunteer from afar. And I really have to hand it to the community at Einstein. I was so impressed with classmates of mine that started different initiatives, and I actually decided to start one myself. I thought it would be really great, something that could be done remote with, safety measures in check and no frontline contact physically. I started Food for the Front Lines at Einstein/Montefiore Montefiore, and it kind of sprang out of this GoFundMe to raise money for meals for frontline workers at all of our hospitals. And it actually grew far beyond what I initially thought it would be. We ended up, collaborating with over 100 different vendors to get donated items as well. Yeah. And working with all of our hospitals and different units in the hospitals. And our team has now grown. We have 18 members, and we just, myself and one of my right-hand team members sat on a panel at Mount Sinai's virtual conference last week, the Subway Series, to talk about, how impactful the student COVID response has been, especially in such a short amount of time.
Right.
So that's kind of been my focus. How to turn the energy that I have and the desire to help at home into something that actually can have an impact and make a difference. And I know a lot of my classmates have been doing really great things as well.
Especially since there's 18 of you, let's say, but you're not working together physically, right? You all have to be sort of find a way to get in touch with each other and virtually and like make this stuff happen. And you're doing it even though you can't really be together. So that's even more impressive, I think.
Exactly. And I think also one of the advantages of Food for the Front Lines is that everything could be done virtually. And I heard from a lot of my friends who really wanted to help and to volunteer, but they have, let's say, an older grandparent at home and they just can't do any of the frontline adjacent volunteering, or they have, an immunocompromised family member or something, but they want to help. Everything can be done, from afar. And we all communicate daily over a group meet, and we have Zoom calls, and everyone is just super collaborative and communicative over the technology that we have. And it's actually been extremely, easy to work with everybody from afar. And people feel like they are doing something good, but not endangering themselves and still feeling, as safe as they can possibly be while volunteering.
Right. I think because overall, a lot of students probably just feel helpless, right? Like this is this job that
Yeah.
they've chosen, but like, what can I possibly do right now? And so
Right.
that's pretty interesting. And I'm sure your school was pretty supportive of this.
Oh yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Absolutely. The student COVID response at Einstein, I think I was very, very impressive. And we have the support of our deans and student activities committee. And a lot of the third and fourth years, leading the committee, overall volunteer students have been really inspiring to us.
That's great. That's great. So besides that, which I'm sure is very fulfilling, what else have you been doing personally to stay sane now? It's just a lot of monotony, and I'm sure emotions are up and down, and you're stuck with people that you've never spent this much time with before. What do you do that helps, or that you might want to suggest for other people who need some recommendations?
Yeah, so one big thing is that I'm a huge Bar Method person. Bar Method Rittenhouse is my OG studio. So I've been taking classes with them almost every single day online via Zoom, and that's been great. They're having actually a COVID charity competition right now. They split us into teams, and the team that gets the most points for attendance gets to pick which charity they donate to this month, which is great. So I've been doing that every day. I've also been, trying to safely get outdoors and walk around now that the weather is, becoming a lot nicer out. I know we all have to wear masks and obviously protect ourselves, but trying to get some fresh air. I've definitely been podcasting, listening to a bunch of different podcasts, and, I love your podcast.
Thank you.
And while I'm not really a TV person, I don't even really know what's on TV these days, but I have started watching Breaking Bad. So that has kept me busy. I know it's a bit of an older show.
I haven't seen it all, but my husband loved that show, and I know people love it. That's good to get into.
It's very popular. It's a little bit scary, but it's also extremely well thought out. And, I've been cooking and baking and reading a lot, which I don't normally have time to do, during the typical semester. So just trying to keep busy. And of course, calling my friends and FaceTiming my family and speaking to people that I don't normally get a chance to catch up with at length, who are, halfway around the world, but may also be dealing with all the challenges that come with COVID.
Right, definitely. I'll get into that a little bit later, but it's a lot of people have said that they're talking to people or, virtually hanging out with people that they never really got the chance to because their schedules and the time zones and, everything was so busy. And so there are certain things that we can do now, like sleep a little bit more or, watch TV again and things like that. So it's good that you've kept that outlook that like, listen, there are some good things about this. So do you have any advice for students now who may be a step behind you that are, in general, it could be general advice for pre-med students or students that are, really worried that like, this means I'm not going to get into med school now, my MCAT might be canceled. Like, study advice, things like that you think might help them through this time, or just in general, since I have you?
Yeah, so I think that it's really important for those that are considering applying right now or finishing up, their studies, post-bac or undergrad, to realize that everyone's been affected by COVID. Everyone has a relationship with COVID now, and I think that you should trust in the fact that administrations and like the admissions committees are going to be, forgiving of late MCATs. I know that the centers had a little bit of an issue, with when they could schedule exams. So be kind to yourself, because I think everyone's going to be a little bit kinder to everybody else around them who's going through the application process. And everyone's going to understand that plans have changed and processes have been delayed. And I think that that's okay. Everyone's kind of in the same boat when it comes to that. And also, if it takes you, a little bit of extra time to finish up your studies, or you want to take some time off, or, figure out a game plan for studying for the MCAT that isn't what you initially planned, that's okay too. And anyone can always ask me, any questions or find me. They know how to get in touch.
Yes, yes. We're going to talk about, we'll give your Instagram handle and how to find you. And also another thing that I've thought about while you're talking is some of these efforts that you've done, like the food donation. I mean, there's no reason that a pre-med student can't organize something with their friends or, their colleagues, and have, something to talk about later on when they do interview. And so it doesn't need to be doctors that are helping right now, or even medical students. I mean, really anybody can organize some sort of relief.
For sure. And the club that I founded at Penn, the Penn Future Women in Health Club, as you mentioned, their rising president actually started a coronavirus committee that involved a whole, mask making side part and a food delivery side part and all these other activities, because they just had extra time and they wanted to do something that was productive and helpful. So I think you can be any age and organize something that speaks to you and that also has a positive impact. There's no time like the present, especially now, if you do have extra time.
Right. You have extra time. So it's a good time to do it. And sort of not COVID related, but, is there anything that you wish you had done differently or known before starting medical school?
That's a really good question. I want to think of a really solid answer, because I know that getting into med school and starting the whole process, it can be daunting for a lot of people. I think that you should realize that it's the first time in your life that you're entering, medical school and entering this academic track, and you should allow yourself the opportunity to learn what works for you in terms of studying and resources and asking for advice. It's all kind of a process, and most classes are different with the resources that you should be using to study, or how you should approach reviewing the lectures and what kind of notes you should be taking. And I think even now, as we just kind of switched over to systems, my process for studying has also morphed, because the way that the classes are structured has morphed. And I think that's something that people should keep in mind, that there's no real right way. If someone's using Anki and that doesn't work for you, that's okay. If someone's using a question bank that they love and you don't really get how it works, that's okay too. If you like to handwrite your notes like I do, that's totally right. That's totally fine. If it works for you and you have enough time, there's nothing wrong with that. And that just might change for different courses. And I think you're also going to learn as you get through your first year what strengths you have when it comes to different classes and where your weaknesses may lay. And I think it's great to own up to your weaknesses, and know what they are, so you can work really hard to kind of, challenge those weaknesses. For me, that was visual, some of the visual pictures of anatomy, but I worked really, really hard to get down how I should be looking at structures and, devise a plan for myself to approach, when the practical exam came, learning how to approach what I was seeing with a half covered up cadaver.
Right. Something like that is brand new probably to you.
Exactly.
And some people it comes really naturally to, and some people it doesn't. And so there's going to be classes like that, that this one just wasn't the one that was easy for me. And so you got to switch how you study, because you can't always study the same way for everything, like you just said. So
exactly. And what might be like more straightforward for one of your classmates, it might not be for you. You might have a strength in something else that, they're going to need your help for that. And kind of just collaborating with everybody. You learn how to do that really, really well your first year.
Got it. So I think that's all the questions I have. I think this was a really good discussion. I'm so glad we finally did this. But if you can tell everyone how, if they have some questions that they might want to ask, because you've kind of done med school a little bit more recently than I have, just questions whether it's about certain schools or classes or just, study materials, how can anybody find you?
For sure. So they're welcome to find me on Instagram. I'm at Deezars, Deezars. You can totally shoot me a DM if you have any questions or want to hear more about, the application cycle or how I'm spending my time during COVID. I'm happy to answer anything.
Great. And I'll put some show notes on my website, and I will put your name there also. And I'm sure I will tag you a few times on Instagram as well. So anyway, thank you
Perfect.
so much. I hope that you stay safe and healthy. And I think I just loved hearing about, what it's like to really be a student right now. I think that it's going to be really important for people to hear. So thank you again.
Thank you so much for having me. It was really a pleasure to be here.
You're welcome.